guys, welcome to this next installment of With Bass in Mind in Conversation With. I've been absolutely blessed with some wonderful guests over the last couple of weeks. We hit off with obviously everyone from Dave Swift to Mo Foster to Victor Wooten, Yannick Gwizdala and Snowell. They're all in the list. What's really wonderful about today though is first of all, the gentleman that's sharing the screen with me I don't think needs much of an introduction, but I can introduce him as a very good friend of mine. Hey Dame, how you doing, buddy?
I'm fantastic, Phil, man. It's great to see you.
Now, for the With Bass in Mind sort of faithful, they will know that every sort of 6 months we do a big bass hang, and Dame actually joined us on the platform at Christmas. Everyone else is enjoying the delights of Boxing Day and stuff. I was dragging Damon out of, out of Oregon, say, hey, I need you online right now. But us two, we've gone back quite a way. Actually, I'm going to start. I think this is worth a share. Check out these two young bucks. Yeah, I know, right?
There it is.
And that's where me and Dame first met, over in Florida.
Yeah, Player School of Music.
I know, man, and I think we're both about 10 kilograms lighter now. We shed some weight.
Little bit. You didn't have nearly as far to go as I did. I had some catching up to do, but I got there eventually.
Now, as with many people in the music industry, the last 2020, the last 12 months has evoked an awful lot of change. Some guys that have been very analog, like myself and Dave, have been forced into the digital world. Those guys that have already got a foot ahead of everybody, have evolved massively. When we was in conversation with Victor Wooten just a couple of weeks ago, he talked about all the positives that have come from COVID and the lockdown period. Now, obviously, there's a massive amount of pessimism down there. There's been a lot of loss. There's been a lot of distress in a lot of people's lives. But it's also done a couple of wonderful things for the music community. And what that is it's given the guys that spend their lives on the road actually time to produce new things. Now, like myself, Dame would be better to say. We're those guys, we're hard-working, kind of meat and veg bass players, get out there playing night after night, always on the road. And this period of time has allowed us just to sit still and go, let's produce something new. And one of the best things that I think's come out the last year that I've seen definitely emerging from the womb of COVID has been basseducation.com. Congratulations, Dane.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Tell us about the platform.
Well, it is an affordable subscription-based platform. My goal, one of the things I did in addition to touring with bands was tour with Jazz Education abroad and hold jazz camps in different countries around the world. And so I really wanted to provide an affordable platform online for those students who didn't have the means that some of us others do. And it was something that I had been kicking around in my head for over a decade, probably 12, 13 years. And like you said, all of a sudden I had time to do it. So I've tried to provide essentially just a really supportive and engaging learning environment and integrated a community, which I'm constantly dialoguing. Like that's kind of the big thing is I want to be involved in everybody's process. So first thing I do when somebody signs up is shoot them a video saying, let me know if you need help, if you have questions, I'm here for you. I didn't want to set it and forget it. I want to be involved and try and support the community. So I'm dialoguing constantly in the community, sharing audio and video back and forth and tracks and, just trying to help everybody out and trying to be the teacher that at different points in my process and my development, trying to be the teacher I'd wish I'd had, somebody who I could just reach out to comfortably and say, hey, I don't know this thing. I feel like this is a dumb question, but I just need to ask. And I had so many of those in my time. And I want to be the person that people can feel comfortable reaching out and just asking things.
Yeah. It's definitely something, I mean, P's from a similar pod, the whole with bass in mind platform with all of my students. I know everybody's, you know, dogs, kids, wives, what they do at school. I know everyone's inside personal lives so that they can literally pick up the phone, contact me, and ask questions. There's this horrible distancing that comes around from video lessons when there's no interaction. It's important for me to turn and say, why this, why that, and then have somebody be able to interact with you in real time. And that was something that I really loved with the idea of the bass education platform. But it didn't start there for you. One of the things, when I first got introduced and I knew about your stuff was your texts. This little gold mine from back in the day, The Improviser's Path. Now, this was obviously exploring, as it says on the cover, exploring the bassist path to mastery. Let's chat about, first of all, the path here, the chronological path, if we can. Let's tell the guys about this text. So this was the first biggie that I recognised you from, but it's not the one that I want to spend the most time on. But let's first of all talk about that book.
This was basically my journey through understanding harmony. I was a jazz school dropout. I started jazz school as a metal drummer, switched my major to bass because I felt so out of place and realized I had no idea what I was doing. I could play the instrument a little bit, but I didn't know anything. And I felt like a failure. I quit playing for a year. I just thought I don't have what it takes. Obviously, maybe music isn't for me. But I couldn't not play, and I loved it. And so I just, at a certain point, rededicated myself and kind of taught myself how to understand chord changes and harmony and how everything works and how it relates to the instrument. So this book is essentially my path from the major scale through, using diminished licks on altered chords and all that kind of stuff, and explaining how I just took a very meticulous approach, understanding chord tones, running different patterns and things through changes, getting the in-between, learning what extensions meant. And I just tried to explain using everyday English what I understood and how I came to understand it and what my process was and how it all connected and how it all relates and how it can all help you play musically and with intention, regardless of your style, your chosen style. It's not just for jazz nerds like me. It can be for anybody.
It's a lovely sort of not confliction, but definitely a contrast to different methodologies that are out there. Obviously, with things like the music lesson and the spirit of music that Victor Wooten published, they're very sort of metaphorical. They're of giving an insights, but there's an awful lot of texts out there from big academic names. I'm not going to put myself in that goldfish bowl, but I will say it from an autobiographical point of view. And that is, both of my first two texts, Chord Tone Concepts, Volume 1, Volume 2, they were a personal diary. When at the time that I spent with Jeff Berlin, it was basically the exercises that I worked through, how I was unraveling, this is harmony, this is how it works, this works here, that works there. And it seems that, I'm not going to say the people at the top of the pile, but there are people that we look up to, people that are wonderful mentors like yourself, like Yannick, and out there. And a lot of these personalities have published texts which, as you just said there, seem to be like autobiographical. It's about your journey. It's about, okay, this is where I was and this is how I got there. Is that something that you're seeing diluted with some students now? Is there guys that are just trying to go straight to the end product, instant gratification, one-click wonders and stuff like that? Yannick spoke the other week about learning a Brecker solo, and it's taken him 3 months so far, and he still hasn't got it down. So it's good. Where are you with that?
Very, very much so. And I've been actually dialoguing with some of my members in the community about this as well, because I have discovered that there are a lot of students, especially some of my students who come in who maybe had some classical training early on, who just very much want to give me step 1, step 2, step 3, and then bam, I can improvise. And the thing with music is that, kind of like you alluded to, we all have our own relationship with it. And so much of learning how to actually play music is about discovering how you relate to the information, how you can assimilate and how you internalize and how you understand this information. And it's a very personal thing, and everybody kind of gets there a different way. Everybody understands it in a different way. I've been on gigs where I realize I'm thinking of a section of a song completely differently from somebody else in the band, but we each have our own perspectives, and you put them together, and we can make music out of it because we're listening. So that's been a hard bridge for me to gap at times, because so much of what a student needs to do is learn how to, it's in the creative application of the exercises where the real vocabulary is developed, where the real learning happens. I can show you how to play a scale over 2 octaves and whip it up and down, but that isn't music. Exercises aren't music. You need to learn how to take those patterns and take that sound and explore creating bass lines and explore chords and explore the musical application of those notes. So that's been an interesting thing with certain students who have kind of a fear of, um, you almost have to practice being creative in order to get to be creative.
Yeah, no,
you know,
no.
Getting creative with your exercises and exploring how you can take this one bit of information and start to flip it on its head a little bit and look at it from every angle and understand it in a myriad of ways and explore how it relates to the actual making of music and playing bass lines and all that kind of thing, soloing over changes.
There's something there straight away. I mean, with so many of my student alumni with Bass in Mind, you've met a chunk of them, but they all get set. Here's the vocabulary and those academic exercises, and then almost with every single person's sort of constructive alignment and their pathway, I will then say, okay, here's a composition that uses that vocabulary. Go and interpret it. And that's always the thing. It's like everyone goes through the parrot fashion. Here's the vocabulary. Here's how to play it. Here's the fingering. But then I don't think anybody ever expects me to then go make music with it. And that's always the thing that trips people up and makes them go, oh, crikey, I can't do this. I can't do that. I get reflection sort of submission videos and people are flying up and down the fretboard. And then I say, okay, yeah, but now use sus chords over Maiden Voyage and see what comes out. And that always seems to be the sort of holding point. Bass education offers some really great things to try and compensate for this. The learner's path, you've got 6 learner's path that are available on the website. Why don't you tell the guys about those?
Yeah, at first I just had a ton of standalone lessons, and I realized, not everybody needs to know all things. It kind of, so a lot of what I have my students do, my remote and in one-on-one students, is think about their end game. What kind of player do you want to be? What do you see yourself doing? What do you want to sound like? Do you want to be a studio musician, where you can read anything thrown at you and play in any style? Or you just want to get better at jamming with your friends and maybe have some more ideas in that situation? So I realized I wanted to think of a way to try and tailor the information on the website towards one type of player or another. So I came up with these learning paths where there's 6 different. There's like the pocket player, this proficient soloist, reading, different categories, and the paths basically take the relevant parts of the site and put them in a certain order. So you can just kind of go, okay, here's a little bit of that step 1 through step 90. And a lot of those paths are fairly long. So it's kind of my way of just helping, because everybody learns differently. So I just wanted to provide a few different ways for people to go about it, because there is a lot of that information overload. It's like YouTube when you're just looking at a sea of instructional videos and you're just, I don't know where to start. So I wanted to give people a starting place. So I created those, and then I also created modules, which are just more detailed looks at one topic or another, like slapping or rhythm, and then it's just, a dozen videos kind of in order and some worksheets on those topics.
Yeah, great, man. Really good. And again, I mean, we've already mentioned it on here, but like, for instance, bass education, Wow, it's affordable. We're talking $7 a month, I think it was, or a lifetime membership was $150 one payment. I mean, that's Dame, you're underselling yourself, mate. I mean,
I know my friends who are better business people than me, oh, they yell at me, but I just can't. The lifetime access is only available through April 30th, and that's because in May I'm kind of forced to raise the prices just a little bit. It's going up to $10 a month or 100 a year, just because I've integrated so many things into the site,
yeah,
and as more people join, they use Um, more stuff, and it gets more expensive. So I'm like, I need to charge a little bit more, but I'm determined never to go above that. But I wanted to provide a little uh, incentive for people and let everybody know, um, everybody, whatever pricing you have when that change happens is grandfathered in. So if people want to get in at $7 a month now, that pricing will never change.
yeah, great man, great man.
So I
And I sorry,
added the lifetime access as like just a little like, or just get in one fee, bam. I thought it'd be a
yeah.
nice little thing for people.
And I can't really recommend it enough for guys. I mean, obviously, I'm not keeping my own interests at heart here with base in mind. We're by no means competitors. It's different strokes, different folks.
Yeah.
But me and Dame are very close in the way that we think about education and want to really embrace as many different sort of learning possibilities as ever. But from a personal point of view, there was actually something that was a massive inspiration. And actually, I remember getting a random text from Sir Erskine going, dude, you put me in bass player this magazine this month, and the reason was that, like so many people, a lot of you guys may be on a growth path right now, and you're going, oh, I really want to get into reading, or I really want to get into learning to walk over standards. Maybe you want to get into more rhythmical playing with slapping and stuff like that. I discovered when I met Damon way when we were young bucks. I think that was like 2013, Dame. It's nearly been a
This is
decade
wild.
we've known each other
Yeah.
now. But I remember just walking past one of the practice rooms, and all I could hear was dick, 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 and I was like, what on earth is that? And it was the very first time that I'd been introduced to that wonderful right hand technique that Dame is become so synonymous with Damon's playing. Now, this was something that by me to reach out to him, and it was because of this text. Right hand drive. There's the one. This book, again, all available through Damon's website and through his content. But the big thing with this text for me is it became, and it did, mate. It became my Bible for about a year. And so much so that I think I ripped off most of your stuff in Bass Player magazine.
Yes. Fantastic.
Hence why we put it up. But if any of you guys ever do, actually, if you go onto the With Bass in Mind website, first of all, I urge you massively to get Dame's book. But that was a seed for what turned into a year course of like 12 months of publications for my column in Bass Player magazine. All on right-hand technique. Now, what was really nice a minute ago was Dame went, yeah, I was a dropout student, but he let slip that he was a drummer. There was some stickings going in there. First of all, let's talk about this technique change. For the guys that are unaware of it, or they have no sort of insight and it's a new thing, I've got a couple of great students. Jose comes to mind, who is all over it at the moment. But he's embracing this, shall we say it's an altered technique, an advanced technique of the right hand. Conventionally, bass players, Jameson, hook, Mark King, thumb, traditional habitual playing, index and middle finger, or with a pick. But you went down a whole new direction with the bass. So why don't you talk about that first of all?
Yeah, I came up with this. I use my thumb in addition to my standard two fingers, and this came about. Necessity is the mother of all invention. I had a bass that just was way too hi-fi sounding. It was really brittle, and the sound was driving me insane. And I couldn't afford to just go buy another bass. So I started palm muting everything I played, and so I got I kind of got into this idea of playing with my thumb down here and muting the strings a little bit with the palm of my hand right by the bridge. I quickly, especially if I did a tour or something, got really frustrated with my inability to play the lines I was used to playing and play the things I wanted to play, but maintain that the sound of that technique. So coincidentally, when I started exploring ways to incorporate that in a more intentional way, I was on the road with a banjo player, Tony Furtado, great bottleneck slide player and banjo player. And I started picking his brain about banjo rolls. And so I started playing just these finger patterns and just kind of the back of the van type of thing, just playing by myself, these little plucking patterns. And as I got more intentional about it, this is where the drumming thing came into mind, was I realized every plucking pattern could be perceived as like a sticking pattern. Right, right, left, left, there's a two-stroke roll. Right, 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 left, 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 there's a three-stroke roll. And because I started playing these very specific fingerings through scales, for example. So if I was, going to play a fingering like thumb 1 2, I might play a scale, but play every note 4 times. So thumb 1 2, thumb 1 2, thumb 1. And I realized, oh, it's like a 4-stroke roll, but I'm adhering to a 3-finger fingering pattern. And it just like opened this whole world, years of study for me and ways to incorporate the technique, because my goal was very much um, to build the muscle memory so that I no longer had to think about how to do this. These fingers just did what I needed them to do to play what I wanted to play. So I was very much trying to catch up and get all 3 fingers to that place, and that's where everything in that book came from.
Yeah, one of the
And then, of
things.
course,
Sorry, go on.
taking that drummer approach, with the, I'm very much thinking like kick, snare, kick, snare. I start kind of just like subdividing on my own in between with muted notes and things like that, and it became this whole, like you said, percussive kind of style of playing.
Something there straight away. I mean, if you go back to when you was just mucking around the bass, if you don't mind for a second, but one of the things that the viewers will immediately clock is how massively more percussive it is. I always talk about, if we're in the booth cutting a record, playing straight eighth notes, using one finger so you get the monotone da 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 da.
Consistency.
Yeah, exactly. Because 2 fingers, 2 different lengths, 2 different densities, 2 different sort of articulations and different dynamics come out of it from the right hand. But there, where you're using first of all the percussive hit, thumb index index, you're not getting da 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 da. You're getting this. It's almost like congas or something as it goes around. Was there any sort of Achilles heels that you discovered? Obviously, you said about the drums thing, but there was anything. Gary Willis talks about using a ramp for natural compression and stuff like that to try and get the slightly more even consistency out there. But what was the sort of discrepancies in the technique that you had to fight with first of all?
Well, certainly, like you said, every finger sounds different, and the thumb sounds vastly different. It's coming from a different angle. It's a big, fatter, shorter, digit. So I very much practiced trying to get as even as I could, just for control's sake. And then practicing, I started incorporating dynamic spikes into some of those lines. Like, okay, I'm going to play every note 4 times, but I'm going to, add a little accent on the second and fourth, little things like that. But my whole, this carries over from my drumming days. I can remember being struck. I was listening to some Vinnie Colaiuta thing, and it was one of those big, and he's doing this big round circular kind of fill around the drums. And I was struck by this sense that it just sounded like a wave of sound. And all I heard was this wave of dynamics. Wow, wow, wow. It wasn't about the rudiments or the anything. It was just this wave of sound. So I've always been very hyper aware of dynamics and articulation and how that translates into music. I always play something like I want to sing it if I'm playing a line. And with that kind of technique, I'm essentially playing it like I would want to drum it. And I very much think about ghost notes on the snare. You know, those really subtle hits in between the big twos and fours or whatever it is. And that's kind of the approach I took to that technique, especially early on, was just thinking of it like a drummer on a drum set and then adding notes to it.
I like it. I like it. So I mean, obviously, massive push for guys. If anybody's really interested in technique, obviously there's resources directly through the website with Dame. But that book, Right Hand Drive, is absolutely killer. Absolutely killer. There's no filler in that one. If you was literally, I mean, it's such a transcend, like you can apply that technique to so many different levels. The big thing is the muting. I mean, obviously, if we go, back to sort of Carol Kay's stuff and Jameson, that sort of muted bass sound from the 50s and 60s. But so this isn't just a technique which is modernization. You can play this in a traditional vibe to get traditional tones out of it. It's just basically evolving the way the right hand sort of attacks the fundamental.
Yeah, once I got comfortable with my thumb, I definitely found myself anchoring. The one thing you'll notice is that you lose your thumb as an anchor. So I wind up anchoring with my pinky quite a bit. And once I got a little bit comfortable with that, either under the pickup, on the body, or on the bridge, I find myself routinely incorporating my thumb into my lines when I'm playing fingerstyle without even really realizing I'm doing it. It just becomes another finger available to you, and your hand will just use whatever's most efficient to play whatever note needs to be played.
There's a lovely myth here though straight away that you've cracked, and I think if anybody's watching and they've clocked it, is that first of all the absolute mastery of the technique from Damian. He really is an absolute world class player at this sort of technique. But there's no ramp on that bass.
No, I do have ramps. Actually, there are oversized pickup molds on my six strings, most of my basses. This bass doesn't have a ramp, and I was wondering if it would throw me. But it really doesn't, although I do tend to play over the pickup. I've always been an over the pickup kind of guy. But I can use my thumb anywhere I want. And, another reason this technique really resonated with me is because, for example, ergonomics. If we're just standing and walking or whatever, and we just raise our hands without thinking about it, we get this kind of natural little bit of curve. It's almost like we're holding a tennis ball in our hands. Our fingers kind of naturally curve over. And the thing I discovered about using this technique is my arm and hand are in their perfectly natural resting position when I play now. There's no acute angles happening anywhere. It's just such an ergonomic way for me to play that it feels more natural than anything to me now. And yeah, ramps aren't a necessity. They do make it easier for consistency, and I do prefer them. But this bass, the pickup actually falls right under where my hand is, so I tend to gravitate there. But I use it, when I'm over the fretboard, doing that kind of a thing. Anywhere, you can play anything anywhere.
It's just nice because I think there's a lot of guys that that not knowing the wood from the trees, they might go, I really want to do that technique, but I need to buy a new bass or get a ramp fitted and stuff. But there are things you can do to straight away kind of get involved and go for it. I did the same thing. I mean, when we first met, I was on Overwater Progresses before my signature bass came out, and that had a ramp fitted. And then I was using soap bar pickups, so I realised that the way that I played that technique, I wasn't over the ramp anyway. I was over the pickup, so I got rid of the ramp, and it kind of helped things out a little. And you're right, you say about, obviously Gary Willis really, Gary in geology he's the master of it. I don't think Gary Willis is human, Dame. I think Gary sees the world like the Matrix. It's just all binary code. Love him.
He's a master and a master of efficiency.
Yeah, but again, exactly what Damon's saying here, guys. It echoes with what Willis was talking about the posture, about bringing the hand across the road, and that's the natural position for the bass. Obviously, he took the left hand to a whole new level, And that book, what was it, Fretbolt Harmony, just, oh
Yeah.
my. That and your book are equal to an awful lot of sleepless nights for me, son. Yeah,
Gary's book, 101 Bass Tips,
yeah,
was one of
great
my
tips.
favorite books, man. That was like my Bible for a while. I would just sit there on the couch and read through that. I loved that book.
Isn't it funny how so many people have got different texts that are their go-to? I
Yeah.
remember as a student, mine was the Bass Bible by Paul Westwood, big British session play, played on everything, and very much from that generation of Mo Foster and those guys on the British scene. But Paul did this wonderful text, which different chapters, different styles and playing stuff. Man, I don't think I owned any other bass books for a while. And you pick it up and the spine's gone,
Yeah.
pages have fallen out of it. There's my handwriting all over it. I love that. There's nothing worse than seeing. I remember a couple of my students. Oh yeah, I bought your books a couple of years ago at the bass show. I just recently. I said, oh great, we'll get it out. We'll do some work. And they picked it up, and you could see it's not even been opened. It's like,
Yeah, it's like you still got to crack the spine to get it to stay.
yeah, man. If it's falling apart, it's been played, so that's all good. Dane, thanks a lot for sharing the stuff on the techniques. It's not just been the development of obviously basseducation.com. It's also been a move over to playing live and doing some live streaming, and you've been a busy man. First of all, Trio Uncontrollable. That went out. Tell us about tell us about actually first of all streamed gigs. That's a whole new environment. Full stop.
Yeah, and I don't see that going anywhere, even in the post-COVID world, whatever that looks like. It's become a real viable platform. And speaking of Yannick, I remember years ago being at his house, and he was getting ready to go on a tour with his band. I think it was Jojo Mayer. He'd called his buddies from back in New York, and they're doing a tour, and he was all excited, and he was explaining how, I got these guys I want to play with, but we're playing these small little jazz clubs all over Europe. How can I afford to play the guys I want to play with? Ah, I know. And if you know Yannick, you can visualize this. I'm going to bring my own camera and 100 feet of Cat 5 cable and like a bunch of extra gear, and I'm going to sell tickets and live stream tickets, so you can play an 80 capacity room and sell 300 tickets. He was doing that a long time ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, thankfully where I live in Portland, there was a couple of companies in here and in Seattle that really pulled their resources like quickly. They just pivoted right towards. They saw it right away and started organizing streaming concerts. So there's a sound guy, a video guy or person, and they just make it happen. And multiple camera angles. I've done some shows where it's just like people mounting their Android phones on
Yeah.
whatever cameras they had available. But it's pretty cool. It feels a little surreal to be back in the club with your buddies and everybody's wearing a mask, so you can't read facial expressions and there's no audience.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a different thing. But I know across the board, all of us are also just so hungry to play with other people that it winds up feeling more like you're having a rehearsal you actually want to be at. Like you're just playing. It's casual, no big deal. You forget anybody's watching, and you're just so excited to play. And it's been great. And people are, one, just sweet, thoughtful, sympathetic, and generous with their want to support the creative community. And also, people are so hungry for live music that I've found that for the most part, viewership has been really good, and people chuck in the tips, and it pays enough to pay everybody, the crews and the bands, and it's been a blast.
I remember reading Newton Faulkner, great guitarist and singer in the UK. He had one of his biggest ever live shows. Again, he's used to playing the smaller clubs. I remember seeing him opening for, I want to say, John Mayer at the Royal Albert Hall in London. But he did a streamed gig, and I think he sold more tickets and more revenue because obviously it's to the world market and not just the 400 people that you can get into the auditorium. So it is night and day. It changes your perception for me. And I don't know if you felt this as well. I do a lot of theatre stuff and I do a lot of sort of club work and playing. And I found we was very lucky. We had a number one hit over in Texas with Peter Donegan. Won a couple of awards for it, and they asked us to stream a show for the awards ceremony because it was all online. So they, exactly what you said, they came in, they set up all the GoPros, and I think some of them were actually iPhones, and then they used like the Black Magic images, the Amen to go between the camera shots.
Yeah.
And I found because the energy wasn't there from the audience, I became dramatically more clinical of myself. Like, because I didn't have that, interaction to distract me. If there is a distraction, it's a welcome distraction. But all of a sudden I was paying much more attention to the dynamics on stage and where I needed to be sitting and certain frequencies. And that frequency sit on the bass drum a little bit too much. I became a lot more aware of that because of the streaming process.
Very true. I found it harder to get out of my head. It's usually the energy from the audience that more engages me in the musical creative moment and disengages me from the technical aspect of what we're doing. It's that kind of, when you're in the zone, you're no longer thinking, but you're concentrating, you're focused, but you're not really hyper aware of how you're doing or thinking about what you're going to be doing or how everything's operating. And, can the piano player see the drummer through me, and all that kind of stuff. It is very interesting. And I have found it a little bit harder to get out of my head and lose myself to the moment without the audience there. And, realize how much I took them for granted in a way.
Well, I think the streaming gigs, generally what you're going to see is a much higher level of production on stage, much cleaner playing, I'm hoping. There's a lot of bands that I've seen live and I've gone, I preferred their studio stuff, and and all of a sudden it's going to have to be a lot tighter because obviously it's now being recorded. Playing has to be a lot more refined. So you know what, from every Phoenix from the Flames, there's always positives, and I think generally, although it's a weird environment, I think it probably will have a positive effect on the music industry, but more importantly, the level of musicianship itself. You had a big one just recently with Greg, and it was a tribute to Chick. That's a big gig, Dame. Tell me about the prep. Tell me about the charts. Tell me about the headaches. How did it all go?
That one kicked my butt. I didn't know it was a tribute to Chick Corea when he first asked me about the gig. I played together with Greg. He just recorded on my last album, and we both toured with Gino Vernelli. I've been with him since 2010. And so we've played together a ton, and he just said, play at the 1905, do another streaming thing from 6 to 8. And I'm like, yeah, sure. And then like 4 or 5 days beforehand, he set a set list. I was like, man, that is an awful lot of Chick Corea tunes. Man, that's all the hard Chick Corea tunes. No. That was a lot of fun, and it went really well. That was a great night. I did have to do some homework. I put the set in an order, made a playlist in my Apple Music, got all the charts in order, and started annotating and making notes. And there are a couple tunes in there, butt kickers, Humpty Dumpty.
Yeah.
Had to learn the melody to that. That's one thing. But then those changes have just always been a little bit of an Achilles heel. But I just went with my old, I do know how to prep for gigs. So I went with my twofold approach: slow everything down and work through it with intention every day. I pretty much ran everything once or twice a day for 3 or 4 days before the gig to get it in my head. And then every time I went on one of my walks or hikes, I just played that playlist of all the original recordings and just paid attention to the energy of the whole thing, the spirit behind the approach. And just, that's what I really tried to do, is just play in the spirit of, Stanley on those early 60s Chick albums.
This is exactly, I think this is the next bit that I wanted to bring up. Obviously I've got a good relationship with Damon and we go back, but obviously I get the Instagram feeds and stuff pop up. And when it popped up, you were doing the Chick stuff, I kind of sat up straight and went, oh, I'm pleased it's you rather than me. Now, for anybody who's not aware, yeah. Well, for anybody that's not aware, or you know, this is a part of their knowledge that they're not quite refined very deeply. Stanley Clarke. Stanley Clarke is obviously someone that became very famous and infamous with things like School Days. I think he's one of the only bass players I've ever seen on the Letterman show. I think I remember seeing Stanley, and then Will Lee was playing conventional bass behind him. It was ridiculous. There's the Stanley's obviously associated with that stuff, and that's one of the things that really got him, you know, to that pedestal with the self-entitled album, tracks like Loopsy Lou, and as we said, School Days and stuff like that. Killing material. But there's another side to Stanley that a lot of people may not be aware of, and that is that Stanley Clarke played on Chick Corea's Return to Forever and the Light as a Feather albums, and that's probably one of the most seminal albums of recent jazz fusion generations. I think that's a fair comment to come out with. But a lot of people wouldn't even associate that style of playing with Stanley Clarke. Stanley's amazing, let's be fair. But, you know, the media takes over. Yeah, School Days. Yeah, man. Sit down and try and learn to play, not the melody, just try and learn the bass line to Spain. You know, there's a lot going on. And so when I saw that post, I thought, whew, good luck, Damon.
The beautiful thing, you know, Chick, one thing I learned about Chick, I did a little reading too after listening to the Getting Back. You know, I hadn't heard some of these albums in years. And I think when I first explored them, I wasn't even really all that into jazz. I just had to work on this tune. So, you know, I checked it out. But I was hearing it in a new way. And I did some reading. And I learned that Chick, at least early on, was very much like you said earlier, a warts and all kind of guy. He was a big fan of first or second takes. Like, let's just, you know, if the spirit's good, if the energy is there, it's good. And that's what I really focused on and listened to when I was checking out these albums over and over again on my walks. Because there's a lot of imperfection, you know, things like, oh, that was a little out of tune, like, oh, that was a little funny note, but none of that is what matters. What matters is the energy and the intention behind what they were playing. And I realized, I think in some senses in modern these times, especially since digital editing came to bear, where you could just play a tune 5 times to a click and tell the engineer to put together the best takes in the best way that works possible. We've so much of the magic in music happens in the imperfection. It's the going for something and the reaching for something, and it's the energy behind it. It's not in the perfect execution of that thing. And nobody allows mistakes to happen much anymore in live albums. This last album I just released with Greg and Charlie Doggett, we recorded all 11 tracks in one day. It was all first and second takes. Amazing. And it was very much just like, I just wanted a documentation of us playing these tunes today. You know, December 22nd. This is what we could do. And that's what those old Chicks albums sound like to me. But man, everybody is just pushing so hard, and they're just like, they're listening. I call it eyes up and ears open type playing. You know, you're like watching to see what's going to happen. You're listening to everything happening around you, and you're just very much living in the moment. You know, it's such a be here, be now, and be engaged in what's happening, and listen, big ears.
It's great, and there's a lesson there, guys. I mean, you talk about exactly what Damon's just talked about there. It is almost word for word what came out of Victor Wooten's mouth a couple of installments back, and I can invite people to get on the channel and watch that. That's actually live already, and it's on the With Bass in Mind YouTube channel. But Victor was saying there's a lot of digital editing tools that are still out there, obviously quantizing auto-tunes and stuff, and there's not a problem with using technology. Technology should be embraced. Excuse me. But there is a problem with overusing it, because what it does is it does make music a little bit too sterile. If you go and listen to all all Ella Fitzgerald's sort of recordings of vocals, sometimes she would play with the melody, wind it in and out of tune slightly, and that's what gave it its character. If you go and listen to all those Miles Davis recordings, well, everything that you heard, they were one take in the studio, go for it. You know, I think Abbey Road, I heard one day that the recording mechanisms, Abbey Road, were actually a weight. that was dropped, and that was the kinetic energy for the recording. So when it got to the end, we're done with the recording in the very early days.
Yeah.
So you didn't have a chance. You had to go for it, and obviously that's something that's been massively documented with the likes of the Funk Brothers, Jameson, Stax with Duck Dunn and Steve Cropper and all those guys. It was one take, get the mix right, take the energy, and put it out there. And I think if there was a message I could give someone personally here, is that with all the streaming and stuff that's going out, don't overproduce it, guys. Don't worry about mistakes. The mistakes is the beauty. The energy is the beauty, and exactly what Damon's just been talking about there. So if anybody is streaming and stuff like that, let it go, man, and be proud of it.
Yeah, I tell my students that all the time, especially in these days of Instagram, 45 to 60-second long bass perfection clips. I was like, they probably played it 40 times before they got that, so be kind to yourself. I've talked about the warts and all thing with a lot of my students, because on almost every video I've done, every Instagram post, every concert I post, I make a ton of mistakes. And I was talking to one of my students, they're like, how do I get over fear of mistakes? And it's like, you really have to be sympathetic and forgiving of yourself, but embrace those mistakes for opportunities. You can turn it into a different kind of resolution. It might lead to a new idea. Don't be afraid of it. And I use the example that I've, for years, gigged probably between 200 and 250 times a year, for forever until 2020. And I can only remember one show with Gino Vanelli after 10 years of touring. And I tour with a lot of other bands too, but I just remember one night realizing that was the first time I didn't make a mistake. In 10 years of touring with Gino, I think I've only had one show where I actually played everything perfectly. And other than that, I'm not sure I've ever had a gig where I didn't make some kind of mistake somewhere. It's a natural part of being human. And if we can't forgive ourselves, our humanity, then there's, that energy will just never be right for me. Like, I love that organic process. You listen to old Meters albums and, it's crushing. And then you realize that the tune is 15 clicks faster by the end than where it started. Things are moving all over the place, and but it's fun. It feels good, and that's what matters.
Yeah, I remember I put up the occasional playing videos and stuff like that, and I put up some solo stuff. I remember when everybody was going nuts with loop stations and effects and that sort of stuff, and I was doing all the trade shows, NAMM and London bass shows. And I was like, what? I'd like to just turn up with a bass guitar and a cable, and take it as far as I can, just playing that and presenting a performance. And as a result, I got a little repertoire, I got a little set that I put out, and I put up a few videos, and I did, I think one of Jeff Berlin's pieces, actually Eric Clapton's piece. It was Tears in Heaven, the Berlin arrangement off of Taking Notes. And I put it up, and I kind of played it. There's a few little scuffs here. There's a few little bumps, and that lot is just let it go. And somebody put underneath, man, this sounds great. Wow, you're so great. You're so awesome. And I said, yeah, man, but you should have heard the 67 takes before that. So, what I ended up posting was more from fatigue and frustration for not getting it right. But you know what? It's fine. Let it go. So,
yeah, I'm a big fan of that. Because for me, actually, a lot of my students, I talk about practicing playing wrong notes. Starting a line out of the scale and learning how to resolve it, and training yourself not to be afraid of tension in a line and not being afraid of bad notes, because everybody makes mistakes. Victor makes mistakes. Chick Corea makes mistakes. The only thing is, it's all about how you react to them. Yeah. If you can learn to incorporate them, they're no longer mistakes. They're just unexpected avenues you can travel. It's never that you're going to play everything perfectly from front to back the way you intended, but it's learning to be open and available and engaged enough to react and interact with what's happening, even when it's unexpected. You go, oh, took a left. All right, we'll go this way, and then we're going to bring it back. And you're comfortable in that situation, and so you can incorporate it into what you're doing in a different way.
It's a very organic sort of perspective for bass, I mean, bass players generally are very clinical. This is major, therefore we play major. This is minor, we should play minor. This is dominant, we should play dominant. Oh no, we can't possibly play this note because it's not diatonic to the harmony that we're using. And that is a sort of very clinical approach for bassists. But the first thing you do if you go down to, I don't know, the Mississippi Delta to the bottom of that, like, and they play a dominant chord and they play a minor pentatonic straight over the top of it, and you go, well, that's the wrong note, surely. Yeah, but it sounds good. Let it go.
Does it sound good? I remember once early on asking a band leader, I was like, what scale should I use over this? Can I use this chord? And he said, oh, does it sound good?
There you go. I think
okay. I hadn't thought of that.
I think that's probably the best line to finish this on. I don't know. Does it sound good? There's your guys. That was wonderful. That's good. Damian Erskine has been an incredible character over the last couple of years. I've kind of felt not brotherly but family, and loving seeing the platform and everything that he is growing and growing and growing. Yet he is getting slimmer and slimmer by the moment, which is great. Basseducation.com, guys. Get yourself over there. Check out the different sort of subscriptions available. The Learner's Path is absolutely excellent. If you want to get into that percussive right hand stuff, once again, hit the website and you can reach out to Damon to get hold of Right Hand Drive. It was my absolute manual for a year. Lots of people talk about different things. I don't mind it, man. I'm going to blow smoke up your ass, okay? Some people will talk about, I don't know, Scotty Devine will talk about Gary Willis and the Fretboard Harmony book. Man, right hand technique blew my mind. So if you're looking for a fresh perspective, you want to get something new under your fingers, sometimes the answers are in the past, and they're in Damon's past, a right hand drive. There's some great stuff on Instagram from Damon. Obviously, go and check out Greg Cabell's stuff, the Tribute to Chick. I don't know if that's still available to get streamed. Can you still download that, Damon?
I think Left Door Streaming is the company who streamed it, and I think it's available on their YouTube channel.
Well, we'll chat after the chat, and then we'll put the links into this when it goes up on Facebook, and you can direct some people there. That's all great. Guys, as always, I've been Phil Mann. This is With Bass in Mind, and this monster gentleman is Damian Erskine. Thanks, Dame.
Thank you, brother. So good to see you again.
Yeah, as always. Guys, we'll see you soon. Take care.